Take us away, Kim.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We're excited to launch into today's Energy Code Board meeting. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll jump in. Okay. Give it one moment. All right, I think you guys got it. Cool. All right, so, and my computer's moving slow, so apologies. I'm just making sure everything is working over here. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone, as always, for being here, taking the time with us this morning, almost afternoon. So the objectives for our meeting today are a couple of key pieces. The first, we've been taking a lot of your guys' feedback into account, thinking through the limited time we've had in these meetings for discussion and how much the board has been asked to do offline. And so with all of that that we've been collecting, we want to propose a couple of schedule updates for you guys that we'll share and then ask you guys to do a quick vote on, just to make sure we have a little bit more time in these actual meetings for the discussion. So we're really making sure you guys have the time you need to really have the discussions that you want to have about this code. The next thing we want to do is wrap up our discussion on home size. And I think I've probably had that on every one of the last 3 PowerPoint meeting note objectives, but this is actually going to be the last conversation on home size that we have in our schedule. So hopefully we can get to our final conclusions. And then the last piece of today's meeting will be to review proposals from the board on changes that folks wanted to make to the residential provisions of the model electric and solar ready code that we built as a board in our last round of this effort. All right, so how that looks in our agenda, we'll start with a welcome and approval of meeting minutes. And then I'm going to pass it over to David to just give a few board reminders from himself as you all's counsel about this process and about the resources that you all have in this process. Then we'll spend about 10 minutes going through those schedule updates and getting confirmation from you all that they work with your schedules. Then we'll jump into home size and wrap up with the residential model code discussion for electric ready and solar ready. And then we'll wrap up right at the top of the hour. And my computer seems like it's incredibly slow, so just apologies as it tries to think here. As always, just wanted to share this reminder about public comment. So as you guys are considering proposals or figuring out what you want to share or discuss or questions you have in each of these meetings, we are hoping that you all will be looking at public comments and reviewing those ahead of these meetings, so you are aware of what the public has submitted and able to integrate it into the discussions as you see fit. Alrighty, and with that, I'm going to move into the approval of meeting minutes. So we're looking to approve the meeting minutes from meeting 17. And can I get a motion from the board to approve?
This is Kevin. I move to approve the minutes from meeting 17.
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Tim. All right, all in favor of approving meeting 17 meeting minutes, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
And any board members who would not like to approve meeting 17 meeting minutes, please say nay. Okay, meeting minutes have been approved and we will get those posted on CEO's website. Move into our reminders from council. So David, this is you. I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to take a couple minutes. Hopefully, it won't take all the time Kim allotted to me, and reiterate and then follow up a little bit on some stuff we talked about at the end of the last meeting. And maybe the first and most important thing I just wanted to really underscore is that when I'm here and in this role, I'm representing the entire Model Energy Code Board. I'm not CEO's attorney. I do represent CEO on some other matters, and I do represent CDPHE on some other matters. and I even have a couple other clients, but when I'm here, I'm representing the whole model energy code board. And because of that, you can always reach out to me. If you have, in fact, I talked to a couple folks over the past few days with legal questions they had, or just process questions they had, and you can always reach out to me. And we can talk one-on-one about anything that you want to talk about. So related to the board, obviously. So also, Kim asked me to add a little tag onto the end of that statement and say, if you have any technical questions, you can always reach out to Hope. So those are just two things we wanted to highlight for everyone. I have noticed the board getting bogged down with some legal questions during the meetings, and I've been like hesitant to chime in. Please ask me if you'd like a legal opinion about something. If that's during the board meeting, I might have to say, I'm not going to answer that right here, but I'll get back to you next time, or I'll put it in writing, or I'll do something, or give me a call and we can talk about it. Related to that, you all, while I do think it's really important for you all to be prepared before board meetings and do all the things Kim asked you to do, I don't think you need to be an expert on the law or the statute or any of that. That's why I'm here, and that's why we've got a facilitation team. That's why you've got a lawyer, and it's really our job to make sure that you guys don't do anything illegal. Obviously, if you see something obvious, highlight it to us and we'll talk about it. But you don't need to be an expert in the statute. That's why we're here. So be prepared, know what we're going to talk about, come with questions, but at the end of the day, you can ask us for support. Really, your job is to make policy decisions, not make the legal calls. That's it. That's what I wanted to remind you all. There were some questions, I think, last time about some process, and at the end of the meeting, I kind of got a little nervous during the meeting and wanted to call you all back, and I think I've said most of this already, but I just wanted to really underscore that and let you know you can call me anytime you want. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, David. So before we roll on, any questions that the board has for David, or any comments before we move into the rest of today's meeting? Yeah, Carolyn.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. I think one thing that would be helpful from the last meeting, there was the discussion about our ability to move in appendices and move them and adopt them into the body of the code. And specifically, I think the question was then to the degree we can subsequently modify, as long as it's not strengthening the appendice that's moved in. And I think getting just a definitive answer about that could be helpful to mitigate us from being bogged down around that discussion. And the specific example being, if we move an entire appendices in and then only apply it to the large buildings was the topic of discussion last time. My understanding is that we have the authority. I think getting a legal opinion on that formally would be helpful. You don't have to do it today, but I think as we continue to navigate that particular discussion, I just feel it would be helpful to get a definitive decision on that interpretation.
Sure. Carolyn, did my email to you all?
I could have missed that. So
Okay.
Thank you.
So check your email, because it's not from me. I forwarded it to Kim, who then forwarded it blind copy to the group, so that you all aren't debating anything outside of a notice board meeting, but you should have an email from Kim with my legal opinion on that question.
Perfect. And then maybe we could incorporate that into the minutes so it's more formal, so that there's clarity for the viewing public about that. Is that possible?
That's up to you all. Obviously, if you all decide to make conversation you've had with your attorney public, that's you all waiving attorney-client privilege. So you'd all have to decide you wanted to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, David. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so we can keep going. David, thank you for joining us and sharing that this morning.
So
Okay, so now we're going to move into some schedule updates. And I don't want to, this should not cause an alarm. Really what Adam and I tried to do after our last meeting is really look intentionally at our schedule, the meetings that we have on it, and try to understand where we have flexibility to add more discussion time for the board. We know that these first, the meetings from basically July until now have been really heavy, a lot of topics covered, a lot of things to get through. And we're kind of getting towards the end of that. But soon we'll be in the space of having an actual draft code that you guys are reacting to and proposing changes to. And so we also recognize how critical those intervention points are in our process. And so we really want to make sure we've got enough time as a board to have you guys discuss in person and do less of the follow-up surveys that we've been asking you all to complete. So I'm just going to explain this slide really quick. We are proposing a couple of different things. This first slide here is a proposal to add one new meeting to our schedule. And then the next slide will have a little bit of a different proposal on it. So starting with our meeting, which is November 21st. So this is after we've wrapped up our discussions on the model code. This is our first meeting where the board will be submitting proposals on the first commercial draft that you all have received, the first pre-public commercial draft. December 12th was our planned meeting to discuss the residential proposals to change the residential draft that you guys will be getting soon. As you guys remember, a couple meetings ago, we voted to secure some time, a hold on our calendars for a meeting on December. What Adam and I came to is that rather than having December 17th replace our December 12th meeting, we plan to keep both meetings at the 2-hour mark to make sure that we have enough time to wrap all of the conversation and discussion that needs to happen on the pre-public draft of the code. This is, again, right, our first opportunity to look at the code language and provide suggested changes, and we wanted to make sure we had time to get through all of that, since somehow these 2-hour meetings go like that. So we weren't going to put that one to a vote. That one's already on your calendars. If anyone has an extreme issue with that, or is like, whoa, that's not what I was planning for, please shoot me a chat or Adam and I an email, and we can maybe work offline with you to resolve that issue. After our December 17th meeting, we won't be seeing each other again until February 11th. We're going to release that first public draft of the code to everybody on January 3rd. There will be a month-long public comment period following that. February 11th, we reconvene and we have our second and final live public comment meeting where we'll invite members of the public to sign up to give public comment on the draft. And then the white meetings are the ones that we already have on our schedule. The green are the new ones. So the current way we have it scheduled is that we have then, after that public comment meeting, only 2 meetings with the board to discuss proposals and changes from the first draft that we want to see in the second draft. Given that this is going to follow a month-long public comment period, that this is probably going to be the public comment period where we get the most engagement in comments from the public. Adam and I felt that 2 meetings was not going to be sufficient to have all of the discussion that we want to have around what we might want to change from draft 1 into draft 2. So we are proposing to add a meeting on Tuesday, March 4th or Thursday, March 6th, so that we have 3 full meetings to discuss board proposals for the first draft. And then, Andrew, let me just wrap this slide and then I will love to get to your question. And then after those 3 meetings, our team will be putting together the second draft based on all of the proposals the board voted in, and we will release that to the public on April 4th. Andrew.
Yes, the anticipated date of release of the residential draft is what, was that November 18th or thereabout?
November 12th.
November 12th. With the commercial code being already released, is the time between each consistent?
We tried to make it as consistent as possible. I believe you all had 4 weeks to review the commercial code, and you will have 3 full weeks to review the residential code. Adam, does that sound right? I can pull up the syllabus, but I think that's what.
I think it was actually closer to 5 weeks for commercial, and I think it'll be closer to 4 weeks for residential. And that is all due to holidays that we sadly cannot avoid. So we would have given you all longer and moved our other meetings into later in December, but obviously that clashes with holidays. So
No, I would have preferred December 17th as the December 12th date. That's just a preference.
Thanks, Andrew. And I will say that I think, keeping December 17th, there's likely going to be quite a few proposals on commercial that might need to be discussed on December 12th before we roll into residential. So, okay, so I think the thing that I would like to do on this slide is have everybody pull up their calendars. We need to, unless there are other questions or concerns, would like to vote with this board, do a quick straw poll on whether you guys would prefer Tuesday, March 4th or Thursday, March 6th. Keep in mind, as we would add this meeting, it would be with the same time cadence as we have been doing for our Thursday, Tuesday meetings. So Tuesdays in the 11 to 1 timeframe, Thursdays the 9 to 11 timeframe. So I'm going to ask for hands up if you could do March 4th, hands up if you could do March 6th, and then actually, maybe I'm going to ask hands up if you could do both first, and then we'll do March 4th, and then we'll do March 6th after that. Questions before I ask you guys to raise your hands here? All right, I'm not seeing any hands. So if you could add, oh yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I think you started voting. If you can add a meeting on March 4th or March 6th, if both of those days work for you, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 16 hands for both. So thank you guys. That's lovely. And then if you can only do, well, I guess, Andrew, maybe I'll just ask you, since I think you were the only board member who didn't have your hand raised. Do you have a preference between 4th and the 6th?
I currently don't. I think it's sufficiently far down the road. I may or may not have a conflict just with respect to our acquisition, but currently, please put them both.
Okay, great. So if both work for you guys, I think Adam and I might just take a look at our calendars and select a date that seems like it'll be the easiest to fit into our meeting cadence, so we have enough time for meeting prep. And we will send you guys an invite, but I really appreciate that. That was an easy vote.
and we will publish it on our live schedule that is on our website right now for the public, so you all will know which date was selected. Just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to ask is, again, knowing we have limited time and knowing that there are going to be, I think, some rich discussions that come out of this first round of proposals, we would, in addition to adding that new meeting, like to extend the 3 meeting times to discuss the draft number 1 proposals to 3 hours. Again, this is in response to the feedback that we heard from you all that offline surveys are really not working. And if we can have time in the meeting to discuss, we should do it in a meeting. I think, again, I think the only other thing I would add to this is that if we don't need the meeting time, we won't make you guys meet with us. I have a very strong feeling we will need it. So just based on how I know how much discussion I know this board likes to have. So like to go through each one of these meeting dates. Again, keep your calendars up and vote on how you'd like to add that 3rd hour to each one of these meetings. And we'll go from there. So February 27th meeting, the current time is 9 to 11. And so we can either add an hour on the front end or we can add an hour on the back end. So looking at your calendars, if you would prefer on February 27th, the 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. timeframe, please raise your hand.
Kim, do you want to start with
with both
the inclusive of both?
Yeah.
Group?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, guys. Yep, forgot my own thing. Okay, so if you can do both, I love that. Thank you, guys. We will start there. So if either time frame works for you, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 8 hands for both. Thank you, guys. If you prefer the 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., and if you were a both person, please just keep your hand up, I think, just so I can get a total count for if 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. works for you, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 10, thank you. And if 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. works for you, please keep your hand up or raise your hand. Awesome. Okay, so I see 14 hands raised for the 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. So that will likely be where we amend it to for board members who can't make that last hour. Again, if there's a big conflict or you'd like to have us consider how to accommodate you, please shoot us a chat or an email. David and Kristen, did you guys have questions?
Nope, just kept my hand up too long.
Okay, cool. Kristen, did you have a question or is your hand just still up?
My computer says hand is lowered, so I'll work on it.
Well, maybe that's great. I can still see it, but I'll keep that in mind for the next vote. Oh, there it goes. Okay, it got lowered. All righty. So for the March 4th, 6th, I guess, Adam, maybe what we should do there is, since we don't know the day yet, since both would work, maybe we just figure out a time once we've picked that day.
Can you remind, let me look at the calendar, is the February 27th a Thursday?
Yes.
So I would say the 6th is going to be more evenly in between the 27th and the 11th. So I would say let's lean on the side of that and do the same time windows, 8 to 11 or 9 to 12.
Okay. Thanks. I like that approach. Okay, so if you can do March, so let's look at March 6th on your calendars, and we'll look at the time windows that are under February 27th for this. So if you could do 8 to 11 on March 6th and 9 to 12 on March 6th, please raise your hand. Do both times. Okay, I see 8 hands. Thank you, guys. If 8 to 11 works for you, again, if you're both, keep your hand up. Please raise your hand. Okay, I see 9 hands. Thank you, guys. And then if 9 to 12 works for you, please raise your hand. Okay, great. I see 14 hands. So we'll keep March 6th at the 9 to 12 window as well. And then the last vote, and thank you guys for making scheduling so easy. Our March 11th meeting is a Tuesday, and that meeting is currently from 11 to 1. So we're asking the board if we can move that to 10 to 1 or 11 to 2. And so if either of those options work for you, please let us know, or raise your hand, sorry. All right, I see 9 hands work for both. Thank you, guys. If 8 to 11 is your preferred, or it works for you, both folks keep your hands up. Please raise your hand.
Sorry, 10 to 1, not 8 to 11.
Oh God, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes and not the slide. 10 to 1, thank you, Adam.
Can we consider the 8 or 9 earlier?
Andrew, we were planning to just tack an hour onto our existing meeting to keep the scheduling easier. If that is okay, if that's an okay approach. Okay, so 10 to 1, raise your hand if 10 to 1 works. And I see 9, okay, 10, 11 hands. Okay. And 12 hands work from 10 to 1, thank you, guys. And if 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. works for you, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 12 hands as well. So it looks like about even split between 10 and 1 and 11 to 2. And so we can, Adam, maybe we'll just make an executive decision on that based on our schedules. Okay, thank you guys for that. I hope that was relatively painless. And I am looking forward to having a lot more meeting and discussion time with you guys as we move into 2025. Before we head on to anything else, is there any comments or questions that folks had here? Will, I don't know if your hand is still up. It might be. Okay, cool. All right, I'm not seeing new hands. So thank you, guys. We'll send all of those calendar updates to you all, and we'll update the schedule on the Energy Code Board website, as Adam alluded to, so that the public knows when those meeting changes are happening. All right, home size decisions. This is the next part of our meeting today. So again, as I mentioned when we went over the agenda, today is our last chance to talk home size. And so we wanted to remind you guys on the decisions made in the last meeting, and then give you a couple updates on how we're planning to advance the conversation today. So at the last meeting, the board decided that they would like to move forward with delineating square footage as living space above grade plane. This is consistent with the 2024 IECC definition of, or delineation of square footage. The board also voted that they did not want to keep the 5,000 square foot threshold for large homes. And so sending that message, the message that was sent with that vote is that we need to figure out what the new threshold is for large homes, which we'll talk about today. So a couple notes and updates. Again, we're not going to have time to discuss home size again before the first public comment period. So please keep that in mind. Obviously, we will take any proposals that you all give to any decisions made on home size as we move through those proposal meetings. But likely, you know, we're really, this is the last open session on home size. And then the second thing is that we have made an executive decision at this point, and the board is always welcome to push back at a later date, that we are going to take a medium home size threshold off the table for now. We don't have enough time to decide on what that could look like. And so our focus today is figuring out the large home size, the square footage threshold, and what we want to require for those large homes. Any other proposals related to home size we will have to deal with as we go through our proposals. Questions on where we came from and what we're doing? Cool. Thank you guys. And Claire and Molly are going to be dropping in the 2 links to the board resource drive where those home size research documents live, in case you want to open them for reference as we move into our next discussion. Okie dokie. So the first thing we want to do is figure out the large home size threshold. So we're going to do this in 2 parts because just to help us narrow down the world of options as a board. So the first question is we're going to vote on ranges. Where do you want the home size, the large home square footage threshold to land in these ranges you see on the screen? It is a discussion. If the board comes up with other options, we're happy to add them. The second part of the question will be to dial in what exactly we want the home size threshold to be within the range that we vote on in this question. So I guess at this point, I'm going to open it up to board comments, discussion. If a board member would like to advocate one way or the other, add a new option, or just generally discuss with their fellow board members, I welcome that. So Elizabeth, what do you first?
Yeah, I only have a question, and I think y'all have mostly answered this for me offline, but just to clarify, so since the IECC currently reads as large homes as 5,000 square feet, if we are to change that number to something that is less than, then that has to be in an appendix? How would that actually work? So like if we change that threshold for, say, you know, our 408.
I'm happy to give that an answer, but Adam, I don't know if you wanted to, do you want me to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I can go ahead. I think so. There are 2 appendices, Elizabeth, that directly address more stringent requirements for R408, or I guess there's one that addresses more stringent requirements for R405, 406, and 408, and there is another one, the net zero appendix, that addresses even further stringent requirements for R406. So if the board decides to delineate a smaller home size threshold that would apply more stringent targets, that would be in line with applying a more stringent ERI score or point requirements in alignment with one of those 2 appendices.
So it wouldn't actually be modifying like our R405, R408 as they're written. This would then be something that goes into an appendix, which is
it would be modifying the base code to essentially add those more.
And when you say base code, you mean an existing appendix?
The base code being the IECC base code. So what we are modifying now, this would not be in a voluntary appendix. This would be adopted as part of the mandatory base code if the board decides to do this.
So are you literally like, are we literally changing the number 5,000 that reads right now in R408, et cetera, to a
Correct.
different number?
Correct.
Could I ask a question on that?
Sure, go ahead.
Because I don't think that we would be changing our 408, correct? Because rather we would be bringing in, for example, net zero appendix and then applying it to something below, to some size threshold that we would set. Isn't that correct? Because otherwise, if we reduced the threshold below 5,000 for a portion of the base code, that would be strengthening the base code. So I think it has to be through an appendix.
It is through an appendix, but it's going to be adopted as part of the base code.
So
So
we're
that it
allowed to
becomes a
do it because
mandatory
it was an
requirement.
appendix? Is that because it was an appendix, we're allowed to roll it in? Is that
Correct.
correct? Okay,
That's correct.
thanks. I just wanted to make sure I understood the process. Appreciate
Yep.
it.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah, good to have that clarification. Appreciate you guys. All right, Carolyn, and then we'll go through the round of hands.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the discussion that just happened. I think for clarity, Kim, as we are deciding on this, is it accurate to state that we are revisiting or still to visit how we want to modify the appendice or which appendice we want to bring in and incorporate into the base code, and then that would be informed by the size threshold decision that we make. Is that the order of operations?
It is, and if the board would feel more comfortable deciding, so right now we've got to set the size threshold and then we'll figure out what appendix we want to apply to that size threshold. We could also switch the questions around to talk about the requirements first and then figure out the size threshold. If the board thinks that that's an easier, flow to wrap their heads around. But yeah, that's Carolyn. Yes, that's how we currently have it structured in this PowerPoint. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think that inversion of the process would be helpful from my perspective. I think it helps me better understand what we want to accomplish, to then know how to set the size threshold based on what we know about the architecture of homes in that size range.
Okay.
I can go either way. I'm just offering that as a suggestion.
Yeah, I guess if I know that there are some board members with comments, so I want to get to you guys, but quickly, does anybody else agree with Carolyn's reorder? Because if so, I'm happy to flip to those slides and we can circle back to this. And I see Kim's hand. You guys can just put your hands up if I can see it, or raise your hand, or if you think that would be an easier way to have this conversation.
No preference from me.
No preference. Okay. Well then, Adam, thoughts if I just swap over to the requirements section piece first?
I think we can at least explore what the options that we're talking about are so that everyone's aware.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Kim, and then I do want to see, Kim, I think you have a question or a comment, and Tim and Andrew, I want to get yours too. So
yeah, because I think my question relates to both and back to the medium house size. I guess my original thoughts around this house size concept relate to the current codes that we have in my region and that were copied from across the state from other jurisdictions where there's multiple, whereas homes get larger, the requirements get more stringent. And so it's not just okay, if you're beyond this X square foot by 1 square foot, then you're suddenly jumped into this huge category. So I guess my question is, in the conversation, do we still have the opportunity to, beyond, once we get into, here's our large square foot size, then do we have the opportunity to make things more stringent as those homes get larger to create additional categories there? Or by Xing out the medium house size, does that eliminate that option? Does that question make sense?
it does, I think. So you're asking if we don't have a medium tier threshold, do we have something that's going to capture those really, really large homes that might be above what we would consider medium tier? And I think my response would be no, and that would on the local jurisdictions to strengthen above whatever we decide the requirements are for a large home. And it's not that to say, Kim, that you couldn't come back with a proposal for like, you know, adding a medium tier and bumping up the requirements, or, you know, using an appendix for large home, very large homes at a later date. I think Adam and I's objective in this conversation today is to figure out what is a large home and what do we want to do with them first, and then we'll be able to know, the board will be able to think maybe a little bit more about, do you want a tier above it or below it, and what would that look like? So does that help? And Adam, feel
It's
free to-
helpful. Yeah, and I guess, and I don't know if anybody else thinks of it from this standpoint, but if we're talking about a large home at 4,000 square feet, to me, that's very different from a large home that's 20,000 square feet and the requirements of what we would want to require for that. So if we're talking, you know, if we're setting the size category, and then it automatically makes us think of, well, what do we want to require those 4,000 square feet homes to be at? And I'm just using that as an example. That automatically kind of eliminates from what you're saying, us thinking about how to address those larger homes that are in multiple jurisdictions. And if that falls on the individual jurisdictions, then I think we just need to be very clear and make that in the explanation about the code, just like what you provided for the electric ready code, so that jurisdictions have that very well called out. Because from what I see in what we can adopt from the appendices, there isn't an already formatted method of scaling. As a house gets bigger, this is how much more towards, say, net zero it needs to get, or anything like that. So I just kind of wanted to explain kind of where I was thinking about, and see if anybody else was thinking along that same page, so that we're aligned in when we're deciding on the square footage, what that means.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Kim. I think it's an important thing to note, and depending on where this lands, I think we will certainly make sure whatever the final code is has that level of explanatory note. But I appreciate you sharing that, and yeah, I think we'll have to see where the conversation lands. So Tim, I'll pass it to you, and then we'll quickly go to Andrew.
Good deal. Thank you, Kim. Just for clarity, and I may have missed it if you said this earlier or someone said it earlier, but this threshold or square footage that we're discussing is based on previous decision that it would be conditioned area above grade plane. Is that correct? Which would not be including lower level. And we're still operating under that premise.
Correct. That is the premise we are operating under.
Okay, thanks. That's what I thought. I wanted to make sure that all the board members, maybe some weren't taking part in the meeting. But now my second question, I think that I'm struggling to figure out I'll change it. Which appendix is going to be modified to deal with the lower square footage in what and how that works, and then how that appendix is going to get put in where and how into the base code to deal with those three different sections that have the 5,000 square foot. So I think, and Carolyn might have said this, but I think we need to flip it and start talking about which appendix and how that works, and then how does it go in and actually work to modify three different sections in a code, because I don't know how that's going to happen. And I think that's going to really make a difference in terms of how I see if that's even a workable solution for once I got to start enforcing this thing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tim. So we'll go to that as soon as we hear Andrew's comment. So Andrew, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. I agree in large part with Tim. The 5,000 feet is referenced in multiple instances currently under what, R405 and R408 at least.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that'll be superseded by bringing in an appendice, but separately, I have some concern or caution, or wish to express caution, that I personally preferred sticking with the 5,000 feet. I'm concerned that if the board goes down the road with too low of a large number and has intentionally delayed any decision on a medium, that medium number is going to get awfully low, and that's going to be awfully painful. And I'm hesitant to agree upon a large without any inclination of what may happen with the medium if a medium is to exist, or is the medium to go away because the large is going to be so low that there is no need for a medium.
Thanks, Andrew.
Kim, should we vote to accept your proposal to do away with the medium threshold?
I think that would work. Adam, I'm just going to look to you to confirm you don't have any issue with adding that as a straw poll here.
I don't have any issue with it procedurally. I think we just need to be really intentional then about we can't keep waffling on what to do and what size threshold. Like if we need to start making decisions, we can't keep spinning our wheels here. And so I think that I'm happy. I think we are all, Kim and I and the team are happy to do whatever you proceed with this, however you all prefer. We just need to start making some actual concrete decisions here. That's the only point I would make.
Yeah, I think getting clear on if there's a small threshold and a separate threshold that's medium and then a large. I think getting some clarity around that would be helpful for us to, I think, address Andrew's comment. And I wasn't clear because we had the tiny home discussion as if it was its own tier. If when we talk about medium, we're talking about tiny, regular, medium, large, like 4 tiers, or are we 3 tiers? I think getting some clarity around that would be helpful of what you all think we've decided at this point.
Yeah, so what we've taken away from the surveys and what you guys have, the input you've given us and the board votes you've made so far, there is going to be a, let's call it a general home category. Pretty much every home that is not a large home will comply with the 2024 IECC as you all modify it during this process. We do not have a tiny home threshold. You could consider that general bucket, you could call it whatever you want. It could be small to medium homes. It could be whatever you want. There is one general bucket. And then for that complies with the base code. And then the board voted to add a threshold for large homes. So we've got our general bucket. At a certain square footage, a home is considered large. Homes at that level and above would be required, or the board has said that they want to require stricter energy requirements for those homes at this large home threshold and above. What that is to be determined, but we would need to strengthen whatever we do for large homes using an appendix to bring it all back around. So we are voting today what the level is, when that large home square footage threshold starts, and how we want to modify the requirements of the large homes based on appendix. And then for every other home that is not considered that square footage large home based on that square footage threshold and above, the code that you all are designing will apply to every single building. So does that make sense? I know it gets so wacky in this space, but yeah, Kim.
That explanation was helpful. And I think from where I've been thinking about things and in looking at the appendices that are options for us, that instead of getting into, well, what's the medium size? Are we going that way? The direction sounds like it's smart to establish the large size, and then beyond that is where the appendix would apply. And if
Correct.
a jurisdiction or if we as a code board are able to make requirements more stringent than that appendix for homes that are gigantic, I'll just use that word, then we have the option to, or jurisdictions can in and of themselves. But to me, it doesn't make sense to establish medium if our only options to strengthen the code for large homes is the existing appendices, then that to me makes it the black and white type of, okay, here's the size and here's the appendix we want to use.
Okay.
I don't know if that worked, like how that sounds to everybody else, but that's kind of where my brain is going on it.
Thanks, Kim. I think I appreciate that sort of restatement of like how this would work. And I think that's what Adam and I are kind of hoping to push you guys a little bit towards, so we can make sure we at least set a couple of these pieces in place before we have to wrap our discussion on home size. So I think then, so what I'm gonna do now, would like to have a vote. So for the board to remove the medium home size threshold, which was going to be somewhere below large and somewhere above 0 square foot, right? So we'll do that straw poll just to make sure that we are documenting each decision and level of this process. So we'll have that straw poll. And then I'm going to present the appendice options for large homes that have been brought forward by the board for consideration, and where they would modify or weaken or change, or sorry, where they would change the base code. And then we can have a discussion about how we would want to strengthen requirements for large homes. And then we can go back to the square footage conversation on where we want to set that threshold. So that's where we're going. I saw a hand up and then I saw it go down. So I think if everyone feels good about that, I'm just going to, yeah, Mo?
Yeah, sorry. I was just curious, before we get into this, I'm curious, Hope, as the code expert, highly regarded code expert in this arena, if you have any thoughts about a process that makes sense here to make sure that this doesn't become a convoluted code to enforce, to Tim's point from earlier. From a code enforcement standpoint, and making sure that we don't really muddy the waters even further. Do you have any opinions on this for our consideration before we proceed?
Uh-oh. It looks like she may have just dropped.
I guess I have my answer. Thanks.
So that's too complicated. I'm not giving thoughts. Mo, I think it's a very fair question, and I'll keep an eye out for email in case she responds to it via email, in case she lost internet. So without wanting to wait until she rejoins, I do think if it's okay with everybody, we're going to just jump into those steps that I talked about. And again, I just want to emphasize to everybody, if we don't like where this lands, or if your opinion was not the one that won out on the vote, please know that you will have a chance to provide proposals to change this later. So this isn't the final code we're creating. This is just the first draft. Okie dokie. So per Carolyn's suggestion, we will vote on this question in front of you. Does the board, oh gosh, turns out if I could spell or write correctly, does the board want to remove a medium home size threshold? So this would mean only keeping the large home size threshold. And I'm sorry, my computer's being very slow. Board want, oh God, want. Okay, there we go. Okay. Awesome. So a vote yes is that you want to only have the large home size threshold. A vote no is that you would like to consider adding in a medium size threshold, and you always have the vote for abstaining. So if you'd like to vote yes to removing the medium home size threshold, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you guys. I see 11 hands voted yes. If you would like, if you would not like the board to remove the medium home size threshold, please raise your hand now. Okay, see one vote for no, thanks. And then if you'd like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 3 votes for abstain. Thank you guys. So that is a majority vote to remove the medium home size threshold and only keep the large home size threshold. So we will proceed with that decision. And so I'm going to hop us over to the slide where we can now talk about the requirements. Claire or Molly, would one of you be able to drop the 2024 code link in the chat for us? So I encourage you guys to open this up, look at this as we're discussing. There are 2 primary appendices that have been brought forward to date from board members to strengthen the requirements for large homes. Appendix RC could be integrated into the base code. Appendix RC modifies R406. If the board was to choose Appendix RC, it would, to apply to large homes, in effect, the board could decide, but in the way that Appendix RC is structured, it would in effect eliminate R405 and R408 as compliance options for large homes. Appendix RG is the next option that has been brought forward. This appendix modifies R405, R406, and R408. And between these two appendices, we could weaken either one. So I'm just going to go, oops, I didn't finish my RC slide. Hopefully you guys can pull up Appendix RC and take a look at that on your own screens. It's an ERI table. Appendix RG, in its modification of R405, R406, R408, it requires 15% better in R405. You can see the ERI scores that would require here for R406 for climate zone 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then 25 points would be required under R408 in this appendix. So that is what I have for you guys. Adam, I guess the other thing, do you want me to bring up the base code? Or should it just be sorry, the thing I chatted you about, Adam, do you mind just sharing what your thoughts are on that?
So I think that the base code already has, as we have talked about a little bit in R405 and R408, requirements that are above the minimum for those largest homes. That's already in the base code. And so I think the question is as to whether or not to leave. Is that what you're asking me, Kim? Is like the options there is under R408 for those large homes, it's 5 additional credits above the 10 already required for all homes. And under R405, it's a 5% better energy cost, or in this case, it will be energy use because the board already voted to move towards an energy use-based metric for R405. So that's just what the base code already has for those larger homes. And then if you want to look at RG, it's the one above that, which is those better values. So it's essentially a 10% better than the base code for R405 in terms of energy use relative to the standard reference design. And it's 10 points better than the base code for R408.
Thanks, Adam. And the one thing I wanted to clarify, so option B, and apologies, the slides are not necessarily set up well for this discussion. So option B is the current ICC structure, as Adam alluded to in the base code. If that was the level that the board was interested in to apply to large homes, in effect, we would take Appendix RG, because we can only strengthen the code using an appendix. We would take Appendix RG and we would weaken it to meet this level of base code, and we would apply it to whatever square footage threshold we set. So that's how that legally would work. So Tim, I'll go to you, and I'm just going to scroll back to this, but feel free to ask me to move to whatever slide you need me on, Tim.
Well, it's about Appendix RG. So in the Appendix RG, it has that greater than 5,000 square foot threshold, which is in alignment with the base code. So what the concept would be potentially is to lower that 5,000. Let's just say, for instance, we take that next step and say 4,000 square foot is now a large home. I'm not going to vote for that, but that would be an example.
Yep.
Then we would modify Appendix RG to say any home greater than 4,000 square feet or whatever, something less than 5. And then that you would bring in the appendix, all the language, and somehow, which is beyond me on how this is going to work. And I was hoping to have Hope, who is also a code geek, as we call ourselves, how that's going to assimilate in to make the base code work, because this is beyond me of what we're going to be trying to do. I work with code development for 24 years now on the other I codes, and this one is, I would have no idea, but that's some more. That was my question. Is that how you would see that, reducing that 5,000 down to a lower number if that's what the board votes for?
Yes. And
Okay.
Tim, I'd add to that the board could also choose that they want to use Appendix RG and weaken the requirements you see on the screen and apply those to the large homes as well. So that's all available. Carolyn?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I just thought I'd share it. I think I will be advocating to go with RG over RC across the board. I think it creates more consistency for us. And then my proposal will be to weaken across the board. So not necessarily to go as aggressive as RG currently presents for all structures, but to weaken more for buildings under whatever size threshold we select as the definition of large. So that's where I'm leaning. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Carolyn. Will?
So Appendix RC, as I understand it, is essentially net zero. And one option that I would be interested in exploring would be adopting Appendix RC for the large homes, but then dropping the renewable energy requirement so that we would weaken it by removing the renewable energy requirements and essentially making it a net zero ready requirement rather than a net zero requirement.
Okay, thank you, Will. I'm just taking notes here. Andrew?
Yes, thank you. I think a few of the last comments are interesting themselves. I'd like to maybe see how that may look, or others may like to see how that may look with respect to RG. If RG were adopted without being weakened within itself, set aside the 5,000 feet, it seems to really mess with how our 408 would operate because of the penalties with one or more fuel burning. For those of us that may wish to contemplate mixed fuel in this climate to remain affordable, it punishes us still. Is that something that would be addressed within the context of RG? To say instead of one or more, it could say two or more?
Andrew, I'm sorry, I lost you on the last part there. When you say the one or more or two more, are you referring to specific code language?
Yeah, it's a specific language in RG I'm referring to that RG has language that has ripple effects elsewhere, such as in R408.
So are you specific? I do remember in RG, it does say if you are a mixed fuel building, you have to go more points. Is that? Or no,
Yeah.
that's only in R405. Let me see.
I think there's
Just gonna
something
pull it.
in there
Which section are you?
for it's RG 101.13.
Says residential buildings shall earn not less than 20 credits from not less than 2 measures specified in the table. So you would have to get 20 credits at least across 2 measures.
Which, to be clear, R408 already says.
No, I think Andrew's comment, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong here, is the this piece right here, for each dwelling unit with one or more fuel burning appliances for space heating, water heating, or both, the annual energy cost shall be less than or equal to 70%. So basically, if you have a mixed fuel building, you have to get 5% better performance.
For those that may want to do a heat pump water heater, a heat pump for cooling and heating, but still have a gas in lieu of doing cold climate to keep it affordable. Is this something that the board could entertain changing instead of one or more, saying two or more?
Andrew, absolutely. The board could consider that. I think before we jump into that discussion, I think we need to decide if this is the path the board is going to take.
Okay.
And so I would offer that you hold on to that thought. And once we get through the decisions for how we want to upgrade the requirements for large homes, that proposal could come in as like a proposed change to that section once we integrate the code language.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Rob.
Yeah, so I want to maybe make a couple points here on the RC provision, the ERI of 42. We've in generally speaking in Minnesota and to a lesser extent in Colorado, we've kind of had the privilege of having some passive houses go through our program. Um, 42 for an ERI is almost passive house. Passive houses we see go through are like the high 30s, low 40s for ERI. That has a lot more to do with the vagrancies, or the maybe some of the challenges that the ERI index has with respect to modeling passive houses. The other thing I kind of want to bring up is if we're going to go in the direction of maybe RG, I would probably encourage us to, generally speaking, strike any references to homes above 5,000 square feet, because what we would accidentally do then is create effectively a medium threshold between 4,000 and 5,000 square foot homes. Which is exactly what we just voted to not do. So I'd probably encourage us to strike all references to homes above 5,000 square foot.
Rob, I can just confirm that if the board decides to move forward with this, then we will certainly make sure that the language aligns to not accidentally create a separate tier that was not intended.
Yeah, but thank you for noting that, Rob. I think it's an important note. Jess, and then I'll go to Kim.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some perspective on RC. It's similar to what Rob shared. We had a local HERS rater reached out to me and said that a HERS of 42 before renewable energy for large homes in the mountains would essentially require ground source heat pumps. So I think when we talk about affordability, even though these are really large homes, this would be a big challenge. And in addition, ground source heat pumps aren't always the best heat pump option for homes up here as well. So just wanted to throw that out here. It could be pretty limiting and very challenging. Kim, and you don't have to answer this right now if it doesn't work in the flow of the conversation. I'm sorry, I was reading the book while you were talking about this, but you had advanced a few slides to the straw poll, and when we get to it, I still don't fully understand the difference between the two options you were explaining for adopting Appendix RG. So when it's time, if you can just go over that again, that would be great.
Absolutely, Jess. And just quickly, so you can percolate as the rest of the comments happen, we can essentially take RG and weaken it as much as we want. So we could take RG and weaken it to be reflecting the current base code large home size requirements, if that makes sense. So we can apply it to a broader bucket of homes, a lower square footage threshold. Kim.
I was going to say pretty much what Jess did about the ERA score for 42 of 42. And then I wanted to ask though and clarify what Will was saying without renewable energy. Does that mean without this requirement of an ERI that doesn't include renewable energy? I just kind of wanted to get clarity on what he was proposing or suggesting.
Yeah, Will jump.
Yeah. So my thought was to essentially require the homes to be zero energy ready. So not to impose a requirement of actually being zero energy with renewables, but have the ERI requirement without renewables. And would also remind folks that we have the ability to weaken this. So if we think that 42 is the wrong number, we could weaken it by setting a higher ERI that we thought sort of pushed the envelope appropriately, but was still doable.
Gotcha. And the ERI that Kim just crossed out, that's actual score of 0, so net 0. So what you're suggesting is net 0 ready, which is a different criteria.
Yeah, so it would essentially be taking the first column and not the second column, but then modifying the numbers in the first column to we would have the ability to increase but not decrease those numbers.
So Kim, if it helps, I think basically what I think Will is suggesting is that you would only have to hit the pre-renewable energy ERI, whereas the appendix as it was written originally said you both have to hit the pre-renewable energy ERI and you have to install enough renewable energy to get you to a 0 ERI. And we're basically saying you just have to do the first part, not the second part.
I see. Okay. Okay. I was thinking that there was a way to require the net zero energy ready without actually installing the renewables for the second column was what he was proposing. But then also there is a challenge, as Jess mentioned, with the score of 42 for the first column. So it sounds like for this particular appendix, it might require a lot of manipulation, for good or bad, if I'm understanding correctly.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, I mean, it would be a board decision, but I think Will's proposing it's net zero energy ready, which is achieving this ERI score, but we could also we could choose to weaken this ERI score. Or yeah, make it higher, I guess. So I'm gonna let that percolate, Kim, and I'm gonna go to Carolyn and then Andrew. Carolyn?
Yeah, I think just for clarity, and maybe somebody can fill me in, my understanding is that RG is, as the stretch code, is the less aggressive of the two appendices. That's the simplified path of the slightly more aggressive ERI, and then the extra points being earned for the larger size homes. Whereas I think to Rob's point, RC is the one that's envisioned to be the most aggressive and get to net zero. So just wanted to name that. And then I think to the conversation around, what's a feasible ERI, I think we've seen from other analysis that we certainly wouldn't want to be more aggressive than a 47 in our climate zone, and probably not more than 50 broadly. So just want to put those numbers out there as generally what I think we should do as a state minimum, to make sure that we have constructability.
Thanks, Carolyn. Andrew.
Yes, on both RC and RG, for somebody who is currently actively operating under Energy Star version 3.2 in this market, we don't have average scores that come near either of those in this table or in the table in RC. I would encourage that these numbers be in the higher, much higher than what they currently are. So if we're already in essence doing above code in the 21 with Energy Star, and if our average score is, for instance, for illustration, 55 or in the mid to upper 50s, and still satisfying Energy Star 3.2 compliance, this is a substantial move. And maybe version 3.3 may get persons close to these numbers, but these are hard numbers. They're not simple.
Just to be clear too, an ERI score, if a home was following an ERI under the 2021 IECC, if it was following the ERI path, 55 and above would not comply with 2021. Those scores would be too high. So
we're not obligated to comply with the ERI path.
Right. That's all I was saying, was just that
Yeah.
if you follow ERI path under 2021, your ERI score would have to be lower than that.
And I had expressed all this with R408, and this is still my opinion, that the code seems to be forcing the ERI by incorporating performance metrics in the prescriptive aspect, that builders are having options taken away from them. With the more of these optional credits require performance metrics within the optional additional credits. But no, Adam, you're correct. If one does go that route, we should already be, as you said, what, mid 50s, 55 or something?
I think 51 to 53, I think generally is depending on the climate zone. But I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that the current 2021 IECC ERI path does not allow a score that.
And we have, or in others have, I still think, elected to go with the prescriptive approach and do a UA trade-off and bringing in these credits with performance metrics. I don't know what we'll do yet. I just feel that there's this shift to force the ERI one backwards or forwards. But no, that was my comment, but thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Tim, and then we'll go Rob, and then I do want to make sure we have some time to cover our residential proposals, so I might see if we can start doing a little bit of voting to try to help narrow in our options. So Tim, and didn't mean to scare your hand away, Rob.
Will do. Yeah. Thanks, Kim. I think Andrew hit the nail on the head from the realistic standpoint from residential builders that are in the market right now, and residential builders that we have had and continue to have in Broomfield. They don't necessarily use the ERI path that I've seen, but they are turning in. We're seeing the HERS, the scores, and hitting that 42 is pretty rare. And I think if you went down that path, it's going to be a big impact on just the cost to comply on residential builders. And keep in mind that part of our charge, I keep bringing this up, and I think Andrew does too, is we need to be understanding that part of the legislation is to keep the affordability concept in mind, that if you dial up or dial down, however you want to put that, these energy code requirements, it's going to increase the cost of a builder. So in any case, I'm just mimicking that from a permitting standpoint. What I've seen is in line with what Andrew was saying from the scores.
Thank you, Tim. Will?
I just wanted to follow up on a comment from Carolyn in the chat that 50 would be the ERA that she would go with, and wanted to say that that seems to me like a reasonable approach. And again, remembering that we are only talking here about very large homes. And so as we follow our charge of balancing the twin imperatives in the legislation of maximizing carbon reductions while considering and maintaining housing affordability, I think going to the 50 ERI only for these very large homes seems like an appropriate move to me.
Thanks, Will. And then Kim.
I just was gonna say about what Will did, but I feel like the home affordability challenge that we are challenged with, the whole reason for having a home size category that requires additional for larger homes is that, to me, affordability does not align with a 5,000 or larger square foot home. So I think I just don't align with that perspective in this part of our conversation in code development.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, so with that, I've been adapting our PowerPoint a bit to make sure I'm asking the right questions in the right order. So I'm going to scroll up. We're gonna, not that, that's the wrong button. First, I'm gonna ask the question, oh geez, okay. Of which appendix do we want to use? And then once we get there, we can move from there into how we want to change those appendices. Carolyn?
Yeah, so I agreed with Will's comment about removing the post-solar ERI. And I think once we adjust the ERI, aren't they effectively the same? Or can somebody point me to what is different then about the two if we're selecting an ERI that's other than listed in either table and we're removing the post-solar requirements? Aren't they effectively the same then at that juncture? Or is there a nuance to them that I'm missing?
Carolyn, I think utilizing between the table that's currently in R406 and the table that's in Appendix RG or Appendix RC, there is room to reduce the stringency or increase the values of those ERIs without hitting the ERIs in the current R406 table. So like,
right.
I think the discussion here is balancing somewhere in between where the current table is and where Appendix RC is, and using one of those tables and manipulating the values in one of those tables to get there. Does that make sense?
And the extra points required, right? I think those are the two. They both have the extra points and the more stringent ERIs. And And so I was just trying to figure out if there's anything else difference between those two that I'm missing than simply that one's a more stringent version of the other.
The only other main thing is that RC no longer would allow compliance with prescriptive or simulated building performance. RG allows compliance with all three options.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
Ah, thank you. And
Okay.
I think that's the thing to really zero in on then. I think that's the nuance that we haven't really gotten into a discussion around, although Andrew hit on that a little bit in his comments.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So I'm going to do the first straw poll here on if the board would like to use Appendix RC to strengthen for large homes or RG to strengthen for large homes. And we can weaken those, we can change those, but this is just starting us with our starting format. So as was just mentioned, Appendix RC limits compliance to just the ERI pathway, just R406. Appendix RG allows compliance via R408, R406, and R405. So a vote for RC is to require large homes to go ERI. A vote for Appendix RG is allowing all pathways, and then we can mush around the requirements from there. So board members would like to use Appendix RC to strengthen the requirements for large homes. Please raise your hand. Okay, I see 7 hands raised for RC. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. Board members would like to use Appendix RG to strengthen the requirements for large homes. Please raise your hand. Oh, you guys aren't going to make this easy. Okay, that was 8 votes for RG. And
Andrew,
then if
can I confirm, Andrew? I think I saw your hand in both. Can I confirm which one you voted for?
I'm sorry, just RG?
Did you also vote in the RC one, or did I just
No.
missee that?
No,
okay,
just RG.
Just wanted to clarify. I thought I saw your hand both times. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for checking, Adam. Okay, and if any board members would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. Okay, so that was 8 votes for Appendix RG and 7 votes for Appendix RC. So given our simple majority rules on these early votes, we will go ahead with Appendix RG. Adam, I'm going to look to you now. We are a little bit behind schedule. Do we want to figure out Appendix RG first, or do we want to just pull those requirements in and allow the board members to respond to those in proposals?
I think it might be helpful for us to just pull in the requirements from Appendix RG into the base code, let you all see in our initial draft how that looks. And I think maybe, Tim, this will get to some of your questions also about like how this will all happen. And then there will be multiple opportunities if folks don't think the ERI values or the additional credit requirements or anything is the right thing to land on. There will be opportunities to reevaluate that. And I see Hope with her hand up, but we will also work very closely with Hope and others to make sure that language is going to be accurate and effective. So Hope, I don't know if you had any thoughts to add to that.
No, I actually was trying to lower my hand, but I agree. I think probably the best way is to visually see the concept before trying to evaluate, because everybody's going to have a different idea of what that looks like instead of what paper and pen really looks like.
Yeah, so I guess we would just ask, like, are there any board members who are concerned with us just using RG, seeing the first draft, and moving forward from there? Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. Okay.
Now I think we still need to decide the square footage question, but
oh my goodness, you are right. Okay, so we're gonna go back. Man, I thought we had gotten away. But we did not. Okay, so now that we have settled on Appendix RG, do board members, I mean, are there any board members who are concerned about talking about the square footage threshold? Or can we have this conversation now?
Let's finish it.
I love that attitude, Kristen. Let's get it done. Okay, so back to this question. Again, we want to vote on this in 2 chunks. So we're going to narrow the range and then we're going to vote on the specific. So I think you guys have all had a chance to think about this. You've seen this question. I'll offer a couple minutes if anyone has comments, questions about this vote before we do a straw poll. Elizabeth.
And just a question for clarification, is keeping it at the 5,000 square feet, that's not an option?
The board eliminated that as an option in our last meeting.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Seeing no other hands, I will ask board members to vote A, B, or C on this one. If you would like the size threshold for large homes to fall between 3,000 and 3,999 square feet, please raise your hand. Okay, I see. Everybody keep putting your hands up. I'll just wait till I see them stop. Keep your hands up also. Okay, I see 6 votes. Thank you guys. You can lower your hands. 6 votes for option A. If you would like to have the large home threshold be between 4,000 and 4,999 square feet, please raise your hand now.
Kristen's hand remained up there.
Oh, thanks, Kevin.
Sorry, struggling with it.
Thank you. Okay, thank you guys. I see 7 hands raised for B. And if any board members would like to abstain, please raise your hands now. Okay. So we have 1 abstain. That is a straight 50 majority for option B, which does not meet the simple majority requirements. Carolyn?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to maybe put some information into the pool from the folks who voted into the different tranches of what the rationale generally was, if that's helpful. I mean, I certainly looked at the home size data that you shared and felt that somewhere in the mid to upper 3,000 range, so 3,500 to 3,800, definitely fell well above kind of that average home size and normal range that you saw in the data. So I felt like that was a good demarcation. Close to 4,000, just not quite at the 4,000 mark. So that was where my thinking was, acknowledging that once you get into those home sizes, that's where you're starting to see some of the ancillary loads showing up into those structures that we would not see in an average home, whether that be, you know, snow melt systems or additional outdoor equipment and things like that. You're also seeing additional HVAC systems supporting those homes. So I was trying to think of what would be characteristics that would push it into a higher energy consumption category, and also just again looking at kind of standard deviations away from what would be an average home size threshold.
Thanks, Carolyn. Kim?
I definitely want to echo everything that Carolyn just said. I also want to add to that my thought process is that if you're talking about, let's just say, a 3,000 square foot home, it could essentially have 3,000 square feet below it because of how we defined our conditioned or our area that we're considering. So that's a 6,000 square foot house, or on the upper side of that, it's almost 8,000 square feet. And if that doesn't qualify as a large home, in my mind, it very much qualifies as a large home. I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Kim. Andrew?
Yes. Thank you. And taking a cursory review at some of our square footage data, we have a substantial number of plans in our plan library that are above 3,000 square feet. And as a so-called production builder, I don't characterize those as large, or I wouldn't want to, even if I were to look out a standard deviation. I don't necessarily get, we've spoke about standard deviations, that maybe 2 standard deviations is where this should fall. So B seems to be the more natural fit for those that operate as a typical or production home builder, that B, fundamentally felt more correct and made more sense, and doesn't mean that somewhere down the road this won't get revisited. But for current purposes, that I supported B for I think a few valid reasons, but thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Question for you, Andrew. With those numbers, the data you're referencing, that is above grade plane space, is that correct?
Yes.
So the actual home size is substantially larger than that?
No, we even have attainable homes, using that word that we call our seasons, that some of those even may exceed 3,000 square feet on a crawl space. We have a substantial number of plans with crawl spaces, and they vary by market across the country.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Once again, I'm going to stand in line with Andrew's comments from a realistic permitting standpoint in Broomfield over the past many years. At this point, we don't have a lot of production builders, or so to speak, doing single family. It's a lot of the townhome market. But in the past, and some of the builders that we do still have are over 3,000 square feet, maybe 3,500 square feet. And to the answer of full basement, or Kevin, full basement, or we're seeing a lot of crawl spaces. Front Range, as everyone knows, is pretty hot soil, and the builders are shying away from doing basements and going with the crawl space setup. But even with that, some are still doing so. This 3,000. So if we had a break at 3,500, I think I'd be voting for, let's say, 3,500 to 3,999. But 3,000, I think, is too low. That's why I voted in the 4,000 range thing.
Tim, just to be clear on this range, we're starting with this range, and the next question will get to more specific within that range. So if for example, you're thinking 3,500 is the right number, you should vote for A. We will get to a more specific range there. If you're thinking over 3,999 is the right number, you should vote for B. Does that make sense? So we'll get to where it's more specific within that range on the next question.
Okay, I was not aware we were going to keep narrowing down.
Yeah, so there's this question, and then there will be one question to narrow further. So,
if that could just bring in 3,000 quickly.
I would change my vote then.
Okay, I think we will do a revote. I appreciate everybody sharing their perspectives. I'm hoping that this helps change some folks' opinion, at least so we can move to a simple majority. So Kevin, I saw your hand drop. I think everyone might be ready to oh, you're good? Okay. So let's do a revote here. So if you would like to vote for option A, again, the square footage threshold could fall anywhere between 3,000 and 3,999. Please raise your hand. Okay, I see 10 hands raised for option A. Thank you, guys. If you can lower your hands. If you'd like to vote for option B, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you, guys. I see 4 votes for option B. You guys can lower your hands. And if anyone would like to vote option C and abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, see 0 abstains. So that does lead us to a majority of 30 of the range 35 or 3,000, excuse me, to 3,999. So our next question is the narrowing of what that means for the square footage threshold. And so this is discussion point 2 for you all. I'm going to, we pre-populated a couple of these. And we welcome any other options or other square footage numbers that you guys would like to add. I'm going to put those in place. So welcome any board member input if you'd like to add an option here or advocate for one that is on the slide. I'm going to keep it in editing mode so I can add them as they come up, but feel free to raise your hand. Kim, I see you. Go for it.
I'm just going to state that if we had decided that we were using total conditioned square footage, I would be advocating for 3,500. But because of the nebulance and the unknown of what a basement square footage could be, I'm advocating for the 3,000.
Okay, thank you, Kim.
And I understand that that varies across where homes get built and across the state, but that's part of the challenge with what we voted on for what square footage means. So.
Thanks. Jess?
I'll add from the research memo that you all did, and I understand that there were a lot of different sources looked at there. But in 2023, this is the census data. This was new home construction. 92% of, percent of new residential construction at or below this square foot range in Census West. So at or below this range, 3,000 to 3,999, 92% of new homes were below that. So at this threshold, and again, not just Colorado, you're capturing 8% of new homes above the 3,000 number.
I don't think that's correct. I think you want the number in the next row, meaning that like if we're looking, it's the 78% would be at 2,999 and below.
Okay. Thank you for calling that out.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's correct.
It's kind of a wonky chart, but either way, 78% of homes are below this 3,000 square feet, right? So you are capturing the top 22% of homes here.
Thanks, Jess. And I see, Tom, I see your comment, so I'm going to add your proposed number in as an option. Andrew.
Yes, I absolutely disagree with those statistics. I can't necessarily share non-public information, even as previously with respect to our average HERS index. I could not in any circumstance support A. I think it impairs too many of our what I would call production homes. And I could only support the number either B or C or other.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Kristen?
How about starting with just two ranges, 3,000 to 35, and then 35 to 3,999, and then narrow it down even further? Because I just fear with 5 options, we're not going to come to a majority.
Okay, I think that would be fine. So, oh God.
If you could go 3,499, yep.
Yep. Okay, so let's do this vote then. I'm just going to keep this slide as it is. So, question 2 for square footage. If you would like to vote to have the large home size square footage in 3,000 to 3,499 square feet, that's option A. Option B is 3,500 to 3,999 square feet, or option C is still abstain. Okay, so if you'd like for option A, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 7 votes for option A. If you would like option B, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks, guys. I see 8 votes for option B. You can lower your hands. And anyone who would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, so that's a simple majority for option B. And we can keep narrowing it in. So I think I'm just gonna make a new slide. This is question 3. And we are going to get into, so I think first option here is 3,500. I don't know if you guys want a third option in between there.
I think, Kim, realistically, to me, it just seems like 3,999. Like, could we just say 4,000? I mean, I think realistically, that's what you're saying is 4,000, and just seems cleaner to say 4,000. But I defer to the board, but just that 1 square foot difference, it just seems to me to be cleaner to say 4,000. But if the board would like to keep it at 3,999, please do.
I agree with
wouldn't
that.
mind seeing a middle answer, whether that's 3749 or something like
I'm
that.
with Adam. Please go with numbers that end with a 0.
Hey, Kim, I think that if we're gonna have 3 options, that in order to get board majority, we're gonna have to do what you just did on the previous slide.
I mean,
That's
we can't,
what I
at
would
some
do.
point, we can't keep doing that, guys. We have to just pick a number. So
I agree.
I think we can, if folks, I think what we could do, Kim, is whichever 2 options, if we don't get a simple majority on any one option, whichever 2 options remain, we vote between those options, and that's the number. Does that make sense to you?
Ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting.
I think that works for me. Okay. Is everybody okay with the square footage thresholds on the board? Not seeing any hands. Let's do a quick vote. Okay. And thank you guys. I know this is a lot of figuring out. Okay, option A, if you would like the square footage threshold to be 3,500 square feet, raise your hand. All right. I see 9 hands for option A. Thank you guys. You can lower your hands. If you would like the square footage threshold to be 3,750 square feet, raise your hand. Okay, thanks guys. I see 5 votes for option B. You can lower. If you would like the square footage threshold to be 4,000 square feet, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. I see 1 vote for option C. You can lower your hand. And any board members who'd like to abstain, please raise your hand. And I see 0 votes for abstain. Okay, so that means the simple majority did win in this poll, which means option A won the vote. So the large home square footage threshold will be 3,500 square feet. Amazing. Thank you guys. That was a conversation I wasn't sure we were ever going to get to the bottom of. So that feels huge. Congratulations, everyone. Just want to say that I know that wasn't easy, and I feel proud that we got somewhere. So nice work. And as you guys need or want to propose changes to that, you're certainly able to in future proposals. Okay, so with the 20 minutes we have left, 20 minutes, we had a couple of proposals related. We're going to shift gears now from home size to our model electric and solar ready code. So this is the discussion where we're looking at proposed changes to the residential provisions for the model code that we built last time as a board. We're probably not going to get through all of these, but I think we can roll over whatever we miss into our next meeting. So the first section we wanted to talk about today is electric readiness. And so we had 2 sort of pieces of the electric readiness provisions. The first is to incorporate Appendix RK, which was the electric ready appendix in the code in the 2024 ICC. Incorporate some of that language into the electric and solar ready code. And then the other 2 proposals we got were to modify language in our existing model electric and solar ready code. So first, we're going to talk about Appendix RK, and then we are going to move into the modified language proposals. Claire is dropping the links to the model code and to Appendix RK in the chat, so take a look if you haven't yet. So what we wanted to do, and I'm going to maybe give about 5 minutes for discussion here, if that's okay, just because I want to make sure we get, I would love to get through a couple of these proposals. There are a couple of key differences between Appendix RK and the model code, electric and solar ready code that we built. So Appendix RK does not address heating. It also doesn't address cooling, but we know cooling is not fossil fuel powered usually. But it does not address heating. Appendix RK specifically calls out requirements for branch circuit sizing based on the appliance. So if you're a clothes dryer or a water heater or a cooking appliance, there is a required branch circuit that you must size to, a required sizing element. The third primary difference is that it doesn't address physical space for the future equipment. So any questions on Appendix RK or any general thoughts from the board on Appendix RK? I'll give about 5 minutes for questions. Elizabeth.
Yeah, just my general thoughts on any modifications to our model solar ready and electric ready code. The design industry is still just learning the original version of this. My opinion is that it's inappropriate and will cause chaos if we make changes to that now while people are still in learning mode. I think that's unfair to our design community while they're still just barely have gotten this figured out. And I don't see a good justification to make any changes to that until we get feedback from the community on how it's working. And that's just my opinion in general. Whenever there's code changes, that there needs to be a really, really, really compelling reason to do so, because it was a lot of work doing that first version. You all remember. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I've had the pleasure, you might put it, of enforcing this since this past January 1st, Elizabeth. So no, I agree with you, in terms of, is it too soon to start making modifications? And I've got just two proposals, more of helping to clarify what needs to be done than making really big changes. Just with our experience with both on a residential, which we're talking about today, and the upcoming discussion on commercial. So
yeah, that's really helpful, Tim. That's the kind of motivation I would want to hear, is what does the community say about it? What does the design industry say about it? Not what does Appendix RK say about it?
Yeah, so that's where I'd like to, when I make my presentation of just, it's from growing pains, from, at least from Broomfield's standpoint, because I know I'm one of the few communities in the state, and definitely on the Front Range, that have some history, for better or worse. So thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Andrew?
Yes, I kind of liked Elizabeth's comment, because I had that same strong feeling on R408 that people need time to adapt, but I otherwise agree with Tim also that there may need to be a couple practical adjustments. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay. Any other comments before we move into the proposals we received? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'm gonna go to Tim first. So Tim, I'll pass the mic to you. You've got 1 minute for your proposal, and we'll do 5-minute discussion and then a straw poll.
Okay,
Cam,
I've got two.
Cam, are you intending to be sharing your screen right now? I'm not sure if you were or not, but just to be clear, I think we need to be sharing screen.
Thanks for flagging that.
Yeah.
I don't know how that ended.
Sorry, Tim. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want to make sure people can see.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sorry.
excellent. I was just going to ask who's on first, or are the Yankees going to win another game? No, never mind. Sorry if you're a Yankees fan. So this proposal one, and I know that I saw quite a few other board members pitching Appendix RK, which I think might be a good idea. I think it would be good. There's two potential issues with that, is that the appendix does not have any requirement to do any sizing or installation for space heating. So that's, I don't know why that wasn't in that appendix, but I don't know the history of that. So it doesn't deal with any of the heating portion. The other part is it does give you a specific requirement for branch, the sizing of what to install for water heaters. But based on our history in Broomfield, and this is going to also talk a little bit when I talk about another proposal, is electric tankless water heaters they need much more power than just this, whatever it says. Sorry. And that's part of the challenge, is that a gas-fired tankless water heater would work with that, but going to an electric tankless water heater, you'd have to have at least 4 dual pole breakers. So if we brought in Appendix RK, I would amend out that one section and then just bring in the other 2 for dryers or ranges. That's based on our history with these townhomes that we've been doing a lot of.
So Tim, just to be clear, what you are advocating for in this proposal is in Appendix RK to modify our code to adopt the 240 volt and 40 amp sizing requirements for both cooking and dryers, just to make sure I'm clear.
That would be correct. Just
Okay.
those two portions of the appendix.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, board member comments, questions. Carolyn, go to you first.
Yeah, and then we would leave everything else the same, correct? Is that correct, Tim?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I'll just offer I'm supportive of this clarity unless anybody thinks that that is confusing. I mean, I think it's fairly straightforward for a dryer and range of what the requirements might be, but if we think it will help provide clarity, I think that's fine.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Any other board comments, questions before we move to a straw poll? Seeing no hands, so I will need to do one small modification. Hope, did you want to share something?
Oh, the only, sorry, I did that. The only thing I would ask is, Tim, did you take a look to see if that's what's required out of the NEC, or you're just carte blanching thinking that it got addressed in the consensus committee portion?
Well, I don't think the NRC gives you any specific guidelines. I think that sizing is pretty standard of what we've seen when we do see those electric appliances. So it's in line with what we see. I mean, the installation has to be in accordance with the NEC, but for the typical size appliances, whether it's a dryer or an electric range, that's a standard size. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. All right, so we'll go ahead with this straw poll. So I'm just going to leave it in this mode so we don't further delay. Does the board want to add the branch circuit sizing requirements from Appendix RK for clothes drying and cooking to the model electric and solar ready code? So if board members would like to vote yes on this, please raise your hand. Great, thanks guys. I'm just going to, okay, awesome. So I see 11 votes for option A. Thank you. If you would not like to add these sizing requirements from Appendix RK into the model code, so vote no, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 0 votes for no. And then if C, if you'd like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks guys. I see 2 votes for abstain. So option A is the majority and we'll move forward with that proposal. Carolyn, I just wanted to see if there was anything else from Appendix RK that you wanted to talk about before we move on to Tim's other proposal.
No, I was just lazier than Tim.
Great. We'll move on to Tim's other proposal. So Tim, this is your proposal part 2, and I think we'll have time to get through this one before we wrap up today. So I will turn it over to you.
Good deal. Thank you. This was my proposal to help some clarity because we've been getting a lot of questions from architects, and in particular, not on the single family because the footprints are a lot bigger, but in the townhomes where the footprint is really small and 3 stories stacked, and trying to figure out where, not necessarily to do the heating, but for the water heater. Almost every townhome project builder we have is doing the gas-fired tankless water heater that goes into a little tiny closet, and that's why they're choosing to do that. And with that being said, the question comes up, like, what do we do if we got to change to an electric tankless water heater, which really makes the required electrical capacity a lot bigger? So maybe we'd have to provide space for like a electric tank water heater. But with that being said, my proposal is to put clarifying language, and that in red is what was wordsmithed by Adam this morning, which I agreed on, to just add a clarification saying physical space occupied the existing combustion equipment shall be permitted to satisfy the physical space requirements subject to the CBO or the building official. That way, that is really an answer that I have to give numerous times to the builders. Like, well, what do you want to have a bigger space in addition to where the electric or the gas-fired appliance. So I think this language would help clarify asking that question. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Carolyn.
Yeah, I support this change with one modification. I think I would add the words, so instead of permitted to satisfy, permitted to contribute towards satisfying the physical space requirements. Just making sure that the electric equipment may be larger and require more space than is met by the gas appliance that it would replace, in particular in the gas water heater to heat pump water heater space, because we have some additional requirements. And so I just to make sure that it's clear that if the physical space required in our code is greater than what that gas appliance is meeting, you aren't by default just meeting the space requirement. Would that work for you, Tim?
Yeah, kind of. The problem we've been having and struggling with is that since no one knows what the new equipment is going to be or sized, my thought here in our discussion with my staff is, so we build a brand new townhome today, and if it goes, we're doing it electric ready, and I would suspect or speculate, which my wife hates me to do all the time. It's like, quit speculating. But with that being said, what size equipment or what it's going to look like in 20 years when the end of life comes up, I don't know how many people are going to swap out their stuff to go all electric in the first 5 years. Maybe, who knows? So we don't know that, how big anything is. So, but I don't think that language would hurt. Could you maybe type that in to see?
Carolyn, can you repeat it? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, is permitted to count towards satisfying the physical space requirement. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be acceptable. I mean, it doesn't hurt my intent.
Okay.
Yeah, and to that same point, like I think on your water heater example, Tim, if you have to go from a tankless gas to a small tanked electric, there's still a footprint occupied by that tankless gas, but might be slightly larger for a tanked electric. And so that's just allowing you to understand that whatever they're proposing is the electric solution, at least may need to have a little bit of additional space allocated in that scenario.
And that's true. What we're seeing is the townhome builders are choosing to make the actual given size of their mechanical closet bigger so that it could accommodate the electric tank water heater. And they're doing that because the way our code reads is you have to have enough electrical capacity and however many if you pull breakers. Well, an electric tankless water heater, standard size, which would be equivalent to about 150,000 BTU gas tank, tankless, is going to require four dual pole breakers. And then if you go up to 199,000, equivalent to 199,000, it's going to take 6 pole. And what that's going to do is require a 200 amp service on the new house to be up to a 300. And they're choosing we don't want to make our mechanical closet any bigger, but we're going to make it bigger so I think that's in line with what you were just saying, and this language would help.
Yeah. Okay. Then I support the addition.
Okay. Any final comments? If not, I might call a vote so we can wrap up on time today. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So in the straw poll, we're asking the board if you want to add that clarifying language into RE 302.2 number 3 that you saw on the previous slide. So I would ask board members who are in support of this proposal to raise your hands now and vote for option A. Okay, I see 11 hands, 12 hands for option A. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. If you would like to vote no on this proposal, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 0 votes no. If you would like to abstain from voting on this proposal, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. I see 1 abstain. So that's 12 votes in support of this proposal. So we will add this language into the model code. The model electric ready and solar ready code, I should continue to say for clarity's sake. All righty. Well, with that, I should have not started going into presenter mode again because there it is. Okay. Just for awareness, there was 1 more electric ready proposal we did not get to, which we will loop into the next time. And then 2 proposals for solar ready that we will address at our next meeting as well. But nice work, everyone. We got through a lot today. So next steps. To wrap up today, our next meeting is Tuesday, November 12th from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. We are going to focus on wrapping up the residential electric and solar ready proposals and then move to proposals to change the commercial electric and solar ready code. You will, if you proposed some change in the survey, I will be reaching out to you over the next 2 weeks just to make sure you're prepared to present your proposal or ask for clarification if we're not sure what your proposal is asking for. So please keep an eye out for those emails from me. As always, we'll approve meeting minutes from today at the start of the next meeting. And then big reminders for the board. So we have 2 deadlines for you guys coming up on Monday. This coming Monday, November 4th. So you have today, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to get these things done. The first and super duper duper important, we sent you guys the commercial code draft. Your proposals on anything you would like to change in that code draft are due to us 8 a.m. Monday. It's a lot of work to compile those proposals, so we very much ask that those come in on time. It just delays our process when we have to follow up with folks on that. The other thing that's outstanding is our final residential code survey, which asks about a few outstanding elements for R403 and R408. That is also due November 4th at 8 a.m. That survey, if I remember correctly, has about 12 to 13 proposals in it. So it's not too big. And I think, well, we've from all the board members who made proposals in that survey. So hopefully that helps you guys move through those a little faster. I will send an email immediately following this meeting with that survey link in case everybody lost it and the commercial draft code in case everybody lost that. And so just please remember Monday at 8 a.m. I would expect an email from all of you with the commercial code proposals, and I expect to see your names having completed the residential survey. Last thing, we'll update those calendar invites and send new ones for the new meetings we approved today. So thanks for that vote. And with that, it's 1 p.m. So if board members have questions, they can stay on. Otherwise, we'll wrap up and send you guys on your way and have a great rest of your weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.